August 21st, 2021 meeting of the Citizen Review Board is now called to order. If you will, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, please conduct the roll call.
Banks.
Present.
Collins. Present. Simmons. Tamayo.
Present.
Reyes. Guy. Present. Akil.
Here.
Blair. Ingandela. And I need to let them get to where we at.
Let the record show that all members of the Citizen Review Board are present with the exception of Ms. Demetra Simmons, Colonel Reyes, Stephen Blair. Let the record show that Stephen Blair is present, and with the exception of Devon Ingadella. At this time, I will ask Vice Chair Ms. Irene Guy to read the meeting guideline.
Thank you, Chair. Please silence all electronic devices. Cases that are brought before the Citizens Review Board are closed internal affairs cases that have been investigated and brought to the police chief for disposition. It is the Citizens Review Board's job to review the cases and render an opinion as to whether the investigation was done according to department policies and procedures. The Citizens Review Board members are provided the investigative files in advance of the meeting. Members of the public will have an opportunity to address the Citizens Review Board during the public comment portion of the meeting. At that time, speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak on matters related to the Tampa Police Department. If you wish to speak, we ask that you provide your name and address, as well as a brief description of the topic. You can provide that information by filling out a brief form at the table just outside the door to my left. The public comment portion of the meeting is coming up early in the agenda, so if you wish to speak, please sign in now. The chair will call the names on the list, so if you don't sign up to speak, your name won't be called.
Thank you, Ms. Guy. We'll now move on to item D, approval of the minutes from the meeting of August 24th, 2021. Are there any questions or provisions?
I see. Yes.
Hearing none, I will need a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
So moved.
It's okay. It's just that I wanted to make sure that there were 2 areas that I submitted late. One of them got in, the other one I could do without. So the minutes, if I could just say it, approved with the correction. It was just a statement that was left out that we talked.
Excuse me, Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. Dr. Collins, I can't hear what you're referencing.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me
I can
now?
hear you now.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I was indicating that, she moved so quick I couldn't get to it. I was asking for a substitute motion or an amendment to the motion, not really a substitute amendment, to add a suggestion that was submitted and changed a discussion that we had at the last meeting. And I think it's been added already.
Okay.
I submitted 2, only the first one, that's fine, and I wanted to make sure that that had been included.
So just for clarification, and I've pulled out the Robert's Rules of Order in regards to what's required of the meeting minutes. There, and I referred to section 48(2) of the Robert's Rules of Order. The minutes have to reflect, well, it says in an ordinary society, the minutes should contain mainly a record of what was done at the meeting, not what was said by the members. So I just wanted to get that clarification on what the purpose of the minutes are, not to be a transcript of the proceedings, but what was done at the meeting.
And this was something that was done. It was not a motion because it wasn't necessary, but it was something that was done at the meeting. And it's let me make sure it's clear. It referenced a discussion that we had, and you had indicated that once that case was cleared, that you would kind of look at it and bring it back?
Yes.
Our procedures have been that when the case is cleared, it would come back before us, and we stated that. It wasn't stated in the minute, it wasn't made as a motion, so if that need not being here, then I'll make the motion during today's meeting. So if it needs to be out, that's fine.
Yeah, how it's presented in the meetings, it's fine.
Board Member Irene Guy has made a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, August 24th, 2021 meeting. Board Member Robert Tamayo has seconded the motion of approval of the minutes for Tuesday, August 24th, 2021 meeting. Any further discussion? Lincoln Tamayo. I did that once before with Robert Tamayo. Yeah, this evening.
You just
Okay.
need to change your name.
Board Member Lincoln Tamayo has seconded the motion approval of the minutes for Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. Any further discussion? We will now continue with the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed, please raise your hand. The motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item E, the public comment portion. I am aware later on the agenda we will have a presentation in reference to the crime-free housing program. It seems that there are some constituents here today for that segment of the agenda. Therefore, I am going to allow such participants that wish to make statements in reference to the free crime housing program to participate in the public comment portion of this meeting. So if you will, please, do we have a list of names of those that's going to participate in the public comment portion of this meeting?
Mr. Chair, Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. I believe there are individuals on the second floor who would like to speak. If they can go to the kiosk on the right side of the building, right side of the room.
Is there personnel to assist them? Thank you. Case 20R.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, continue. Please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, hi. My name is Razel Coffey. I'm here as a concerned citizen tonight. I want to start off by apologizing to the community directly affected by this egregious program. I personally apologize for electing officials who do not care about Black lives. This program at its inception was destructive. When you start a program that's based on bad intention, it has no choice but to fall apart and reveal its true nature. The mayor and the Tampa Police Department have a well-tracked history of targeting Black citizens. Before, it was just specific activities such as biking. Now it's housing. But the whole time, in reality, it was just the act of living while Black. You can't reform a program that targets individuals. You can't reform a program that punishes people who haven't committed a crime. You can't reform a program that compares getting rid of humans to killing weeds. You just can't. These are citizens who already require help and assistance, and they are being targeted purposely. It's not right, and it cannot be justified. To witness the mayor defend the current state of the program shows she has not learned from her past. It's time to acknowledge the community's demands and abolish this program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. If you will, the next participant, in reference to the public comment portion of the agenda, please continue. Please state your name and address, and if you will, try to limit your comment and statements to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, yes, my name is Joseph Nohava. My address is 14432 Reuter Strasse Circle. I would also like to speak about the crime-free multi-housing program just briefly. I think we can all agree that while I'm personally not a lawyer myself, the ACLU are composed of lawyers, and they certainly seem to feel that this program is in violation of any civil rights laws, and have in fact sued other cities for similar such programs. And it seems to me that if the city was concerned about frivolous spending, well, then they would be well advised to drop this program and save themselves from a potential lawsuit. And again, while I am not a lawyer, it does also seem to me that this program would meet just about any definition of collective punishment, which has been a war crime in the Geneva Convention since the Second World War, as it targets not only supposed people who have been arrested, but their friends and family members who may have no contact with them or any control over what they do. So it really doesn't behoove the city to continue to defend such a program, particularly the mayor, who really ought to know better. So the last point that I wanted to make was that supposedly this program resulted in a drop in crime, but that drop in crime was echoed across the city, and not just in these particular neighborhoods. And I do have a degree in criminology, and one of the things that we learn is that crime is a very difficult thing to correlate to any one particular program or reason, and certainly that applies to when it drops as well. So the idea that this program alone was responsible for such a precipitous drop in crime, I feel is erroneous. Thank you, Council, for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Connie Burton, Tampa, Florida. I would just like to first start off and just question as to why a city and city leadership would go to great pain to cause harm to families that is already, in many cases, dealing with enormous amount of issues and just trying to live day by day. In signing a lease or living in many of these subsidized housing complex, the lease are good for 1 year. And in the process of that 1 year, the leasing agent has the authority on their very own, without being coerced by anyone, to ask for a police report for everyone in the household. And it is the leasing manager that can make a decision at that time to identify who has violated the lease. What this program does, and we need to be very clear about it, since it is offered citywide, but most apartment agencies would not adhere to the violation of their tenants' rights. I doubt if this program would be offered and supported in and around Rome Avenue, up and down Kennedy Boulevard, any of these upscale new development. But where people are impoverished and where land and communities are being gentrified, this is another tool of attack. We have watched these similar programs such as Weed and Seed, One Strike and You're Out. If we're talking about truly doing something to prevent crime, let's talk about a program that can lift the spirit of the people in our communities. Let's talk about apartment complexes that is not full of rat, rodents, mold. Let's talk about some of those things. But the intent here is always to control and to intimidate. And so if these programs were good for just poor people, it would be good for everybody. We continue to watch this city go down this rabbit hole of being anti-black, and hopefully someone would have enough courage and say, not on my watch. The mayor, the police department can come with all the statistics to say why this is for the betterment of the community. We're watching now families that are being pushed out of these communities even before cases or charges can be resolved. People are now being more traumatized in ways in which now they're being forced to figure out how they're going to live. How more do this city want to destabilize black families, children in school, people that is already at the bottom? There's a scripture that say, he without sin cast the first stone. I would say those that truly want to live in a good city of Tampa will remove this program permanently. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue to wait for the next participant.
He's on the screen.
Okay. If you will, state your name and the address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Gotcha. My name's David Jones. I live in East Tampa. Yeah, so with this crime-free housing program that the TPD has going, we see that that's just an attack on black folks here in Tampa. The same way that them paving over black communities to put in 275 was an attack on black people here in Tampa. The same way that back when Mayor Castor was Police Chief Castor, those attacks on black bike riders was an attack on black people here in Tampa. How long is this going to happen here? How many times are y'all going to, are cops here in Tampa going to beat down on black folks before, you know, enough is enough and something's done about it? You know, with this program being at least 6 years old, considering it started back when Castor was still police chief, and there being, 1,100 people evicted because of this program, with the majority of those being black, so well over 950 of them, that's unacceptable. People being, especially on the route that Tampa is right now, with rent prices going up, housing being much harder to find, as well as us just being in the middle of a pandemic, which is like forcing people's pockets, and being houseless is especially dangerous at this time. They're continuing to throw families out into the streets, and it is hard to find another housing spot, period, but especially once an eviction gets on your record because, you know, your kid's doing some nonsense, you know, stupid stuff. Kids do stupid stuff. So yeah, don't reopen this program. I know that Castor and City Council said that they go back to the drawing board on it, but, you know, the immediate demands to like not do that, seeing as it is an attack on black people, period, as well as just getting y'all folks in like the CRB maybe more power to actually stop programs like this from happening, from continuing to occur and harm black folks. You know, y'all were built off of, after the biking while black incident back in 2015. And this program's just as old, and, you know, we're just now finding this out, and it's just now getting like criticized as it should be. So y'all having the power to stop that, especially considering that that's y'all's goals, you know, that's what y'all were created for, the board. Yeah, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Good
We'll
evening,
continue.
everyone. Yvette Lewis,
Okay.
President of the Hillsborough County Branch NAACP. Well, here we go again. This crime-free multi-housing program is a blatant discrimination of 2021. It has shown the people here that there is no need for a voice because it has truly tried to silence the people. When someone is arrested, Tampa Police Department would send the arrest information to the landlord. They have provided the landlord with the right verbiage, the right structure, the right content to start the eviction process and evict the whole family. Where is the due process for these families that are put out? Some of these cases go to court and the cases end up dropping out or they win their case, but they have not provided them due process. They have decided to evict them just on the basis of an arrest, which is a clear violation of their civil rights. They have the right to due process. The NAACP will not stand for this. The ACLU will not stand for this. This board here was birthed out of biking while black. I stand before you, the city of Tampa, have created renting while black. This hurts as a resident, born and raised here, to see that I have to continue to plague the hatredism of African American people and poor people in this city that claims to be so rich. We have offered many conversations, but nothing has happened. I'm asking you, this board, to support ending this program until we get control over it and its policies and what they're doing and how they're speaking and what's going on. African American people in the city of Tampa, we didn't start biking while black. We didn't start renting while black. But somehow or another, it always ends up on our front doorstep. All I'm asking is, give the people a voice, due process in this city of Tampa Bay. If you want black folks here, treat us with respect. I'm asking this board to please understand that the NAACP Hillsborough County branch, along with the Florida State Conference, along with the national branch, we're not standing for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Akil,
Yes, if you will, Lincoln Tamayo.
could we get a point of clarification, the claim made by Ms. Lewis that based on an arrest, that the Tampa Police Department can provide that information to the landlord? Is that part of the program?
But later on in this agenda.
So we are going to get a report on that?
Yes, we do have Chief Delgado
Okay,
present
very
this
good.
evening.
Thank you, thank you.
And he's going to provide some education and reference about the program as well. So let's try to hold
Thank you.
our questions until we hear all the information provided. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, good evening. I'll make it brief because as you see, I took a huge sacrifice to come here tonight, and this is really upsetting to see that this is where we're at.
Mr. Chair, can you please have Kamaria Pettis
My
back
name
up?
is Pamela Gomez,
Yes,
and zip code 33615, and I'm here as a concerned citizen and as a resident of this area, and one of the activists that fought for this body to be here. When we foresaw this body serving the residents of this of the city and holding accountability to the issues of policing, this was not what we saw this body to do. It's really shameful that we are here tonight to tell you that a crime-free program that targets families that are already facing everyday hardship in a city that's over-policed, that brought Biking While Black, that continues to not have the sufficient programs to be able to support families that are coming back into our communities. And this is the type of programs that you are voting on tonight is very shameful. In a pandemic and a public health crisis, I don't have the words. So I would hope that you will do the right thing and that this even is considered, and this is the legacy, and I say it to Jane Coster and everyone in this administration, that this is the legacy after Biking While Black made national head news, and this is the new legacies that you want to leave for this city. It's a shame, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
If you will, Vice Chair, Ms. Guy.
I'm a little confused. Everyone speaking seems to think we're voting on this program. I think we're just seeing a presentation of this program. This is not something we would vote on anyway. I mean, it's not in our purview to determine policy. It's our purview to ask the questions about these policies. So I think there's a misunderstanding, unless I'm the one that's not understanding.
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the City Attorney's Office. Vice Chair Guy, can we, if respectfully, we could just finish the public comment, and then Chief Delgado is present to provide the information, but if we could just get through the public comment phase, and then further clarification will be provided when it's presented on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you will, next participant, please continue. State your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments and statements to 3 minutes.
My name is Tasia Stagg, address 2905 East Okara Road. I moved to the Laurel Terrace neighborhood of North Tampa to be near campus while attending medical school at USF. I'm board certified in a specialty called Public Health and General Preventive Medicine. I further trained in healthcare quality and patient safety. I am single and live alone. For about 28 months, I've been the victim of bullying by the family next door. When I say bullying, I mean harassment, stalking, and defamation. I fear for my safety because of that family's behavior, and now because of the conduct of the Tampa police of every rank I've encountered, which is up to captain. On a fraction of the occasions I've particularly feared for my safety, I called the police for help, and they have invariably made the situation worse. They tend to pile on with the bullies and mistreat me, and actually advise the bullies to continue their mistreatment of me. On a fraction of the occasions I've been mistreated by the police, I've filed complaints to the Professional Standards Bureau. Most recently, I filed complaints on August 3rd and August 11th. I don't know the status of those complaints. The person who has abrasively responded to me in the portal has remained anonymous and wrote that the complaints have been closed. I would be amazed if any thinking human could review the body-worn camera footage and not detect the officer's problem behavior, so I don't believe it was reviewed. I placed a public records request for the investigation reports resulting from complaints dated August 3rd and August 11th and didn't receive mine, so I don't know whether an investigation was opened. I have asked through the portal and have been ignored. I've asked to speak to Captain Schoolmeesters and he hasn't called me. I've been trying to reach Major Stout since March. Can someone help?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the City
Yes.
Attorney's Office. If you could, this is just for public comment, so I'd advise that the board not respond or regarding the requests or the inquiry from this member of the public. This is just the public comment phase of the meeting.
Yes, thank you.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair? Question to the attorney, is that an appropriate time during the meeting when comments do come up during the public that we can address them or ask that they be referred to the appropriate staff for some type of resolution?
Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. So, Reverend Banks, right now is not the appropriate time to respond to this constituent member of the public. Staff can certainly follow up with this individual, but right now is not the time to respond directly to her public comments, because this is only the public comment phase of the meeting.
I understand that. My question was this, is that an appropriate time within the meeting, regardless of whether it's this particular citizen or any citizen that has a concern that they're expressing to us, that we can appropriately refer to staff for some type of resolution?
Later in the meeting, it will be a time for
Okay,
the board to make a
that was my
motion and a second to have an item brought back before the board.
Okay, that was my question.
We will continue with public comment portion of this agenda. If you will, next participant, please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comment and statements to 3 minutes. Thank you.
That's all for public comment.
She was saying that concludes the public comment.
Thank you. That concludes the podium public comment portion. I ask Secretary, are there any written or voicemail messages for the public comment portion of the agenda for tonight's meeting? Hearing none, that will.
There were, Chair, just to clarify, there were no voicemail messages received.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the public comment portion of the meeting, and I do applaud and welcome the public comment participants for coming out and sharing with us such information that's detrimental not only to the citizens but for the entire community. We will continue with the agenda. However, tonight we have Acting Chief Ruben Delgado present, so I will move to item H on the agenda from CRB staff reports and request Acting Chief Ruben Delgado to please come forward to address any comments you wish to make to the board.
Good evening. How are you? Thanks for having me. Ruben Delgado, Acting Chief with TPD, and with me is Captain Brian Hill, who I'll explain later, who is involved with overseeing the crime-free housing program. So as you heard a little bit in some of the public comment and seeing the article that came out about the crime-free housing program, I just want to kind of level set it a little bit, kind of give an understanding of where the program started, where some of the changes we've made throughout the 6 or 7 years and where we're at today in the program. So around 2013 or 14 is when we started that program, and it was a national program that has evolved to today. Between now and then, several cases have come through, and one of the big changes is that we followed and modified back in 2016 is when HUD came out with some guidelines on housing. And one of the big things for that was a lot of cities had city ordinances that were mandating certain things in this crime-free housing. The city of Tampa's never had a city ordinance tied to crime-free housing. It's always been a voluntary program with the apartment complexes. It's something that we partnered with the apartment complexes from the beginning. So there's never been any ordinance tying the program. So basically, in a nutshell, the program's a partnership with apartment complexes, both HUD apartment complexes or housing areas and private apartment complexes. Either one can partnership with us in the crime-free housing program. So it's kind of a three-step process. The first step is somewhat of a education section to get into the program, and that's when we go over why we partnership with the apartment complexes. And then there's, we talk about the CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design, which means we come in with somebody and say, hey, the lighting's too low in in this parking lot. The locks aren't sufficient to add adequate security for your residents. So there's certain things that we show them with a CPTED certified person that walks through the complex and kind of just gets a better security level for the apartment complex through things that they can do. And sometimes that costs money for them, so that takes some time for them to get through and get certified in a sense with every SEPTED property or every SEPTED recommendation that we have. And the other one is, just enhancing the relationships. You hear a lot about the information that they receive. So I'll go into a little bit about the information. The notice of arrest is what they called it. So what a notice of arrest is when somebody gets arrested on their property, that's a tenant of theirs, right? We would notify them of the arrest. It's a public record document. It's nothing that they wouldn't have gotten outside of public records. But it's the partnership that we had with them in the crime-free housing. I think you guys are well aware of the city this year, especially this year with our violent crime rate and our spike in violent crime throughout the city. We're at 28% increase in violent crime citywide. So what this partnership currently does and did in the past is kind of create this quality of life. So a lot of the apartment complexes, right, and we've seen it before, and I think Brian can attest to it, a lot of families that live in these apartment complexes, and we're talking tens of thousands over the course of the 8 years that lived in these apartment complexes, can't enjoy the same quality of life as maybe you do at your house or I do at my house. Some of them will tell you they can't come out on their porch at night. Right? They can't walk around their complex at night because the neighbor next to them is, either dealing drugs in the community or they got people over that are, coming back with stolen cars. So there's so when we talk about the individuals that we identify doing the criminal activity, we sometimes forget to talk about all the victims. Right? We talk about all the people that are just trying to live a normal standard of living, a peaceful life, the same quality of life as everybody else in the city that sometimes don't have that opportunity to do that. And the apartments are voluntarily trying to join this program to help with that program. So a couple modifications to the program that we made in 2019 when Mayor Castro took office as the mayor. We looked at the HUD guidelines. We looked at our procedures in 19, and we made 4 changes actually that kind of gave a little more clarity to the program. First thing we did was there was a lease addendum, right, that used to be attached to the applicants when they applied for a lease with a property, right? We no longer provide that lease addendum. That went away in 2019. So there is no lease addendum associated with anybody from the city or the Tampa Police Department that gets tied to a lease. The lease is between the landlord and the tenant, and TPD has zero involvement in any lease addendum at all. There was something in the crime-free program called a goal list, and it was called the General Offender Awareness List, which was almost like a database of people that would get arrested in apartment complexes. We took that completely away. We don't subscribe to that. There is no offender list anymore. The apartment complexes, they track their own tenants. There is no offender list to go into to see where this database of offenders exists, because it just doesn't exist anymore. That got away. We did away with that in 2019. TPD no longer is involved in any advisement, any sitting of any potential screening of applicants. We're not in any way involved in screening applicants or providing any criminal histories to applicants. None of that is TPD's involved in any of that. And the fourth thing we did was we made sure all the literature and everything